Okay, that ends the school board race. And next up is the treasurer's race, which is a special election that happens in November. Carla will have 2 minutes to formally address us here, and then we'll move on to the next race.
Hi, I'm Carla de la Pava. I want to thank the Civic Federation for giving me 2 minutes to speak tonight. I'm not going to have any questions because I am unopposed in a special election that's going to be on November 4th. Audrey, I went to James K. Polk Elementary, so I didn't think that that would ever be brought up tonight, but there you go. The mission of the Treasurer's Office is to collect taxes and revenues to the county, to safeguard the money, the cash, and to disperse it as the county dictates. So this is not a policy position per se, but it's an administrative job that is very critical to Arlingtonians. One measure of its effectiveness is the tax delinquency rate, which in 1983 was over 9%. It is now currently 1/3 of 1%. So that drop, if we had a 9% delinquency rate today, it would be a $60 million shortfall right away, and that would be just for starters. So I think what I do in my office is very, very critical. I've knocked on over 4,000 doors to introduce myself and to talk about how experience really does count. I am hoping that I've knocked on your door. If I haven't, please come by after this meeting, introduce yourself to me. I hope to earn your vote both in November and in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carla. Now we're going to move on to the Senate race. And Robert Sarvis? Good to see you. Okay, I turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robert Sarvis. I'm running for the U.S. Senate. You might have heard about my campaign for governor last year. I got 6.5% of the vote. 145,000 Virginians rejected the two parties. I hope more do it this year. I think that we have a real problem in our country's politics, especially at the federal level. Our politics has become sclerotic. Our Washington is dysfunctional, and I think that we have to start thinking about voting outside the two-party system. I think the Democrats and Republicans have become too similar. They're not fighting for the public interest. Too often they're doing the bidding of big moneyed interests. And I am trying to give you someone that you can vote for on the understanding that I am going to go and fight for you. And not only that, fight for local communities and local jurisdictions to govern themselves without all the mandates that are put on them by the federal government. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I grew up in Northern Virginia, in Springfield. I live in Annandale now. My mom is an immigrant from Asia. She came here in the 60s, basically inculcated in me the idea that we should live in an open society. I'm half Asian, half white. I'm mixed race, and I'm in an interracial marriage. And you know, it kind of saddens me to think that just less than 50 years ago, my marriage wasn't legal in this state. And now we're going through another generation of trying to figure out whether we're going to treat same-sex couples equally. That's something that I, in my governor's campaign, made a centerpiece of my campaign because it matters a lot to me. I think marriage freedom, being able to choose who you love and who you marry, is important. And when it comes to economics, I think that we need a little bit more economically intelligent solutions in Washington. I think that the $17 trillion debt is a bipartisan result. I think that the mass surveillance state is clearly a bipartisan result. The mass incarceration and the 50 years of drug war, 2.3 million prisoners, the racial disparities from that, that's a bipartisan nightmare. It's time to think outside the two-party system. I'm trying to do my part. I'd like to challenge you to vote outside the two-party system. And I look forward to your questions now.
Okay, we have two questions tonight. One from Dan Gurney. If Dan could come up and Don Gurney, I'm sorry. And then Suzanne Sundberg.
She had to leave.
She had to leave? Okay, we need to get another question. But go ahead, Don.
Okay. Don Gurney, Dominion Hills. There have been a couple controversial Supreme Court decisions over the past couple of years surrounding Citizens United and related decisions. This has generated some call for a constitutional amendment. So there is an amendment pending. What's your position on Senate Joint Resolution 19 proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States related to contributions and expenditures intended to affect elections?
I'm against amending the First Amendment. I think it's worked well for us for a long time. I'm a little bit worried about the idea that we would even consider doing that. I think it's very misguided. For one thing, it's a little bit strange to me that we would say that a group of people can make contributions to political campaigns unless they choose to use the specific organization of the corporate forum. That's a little bit, I don't see how that makes sense. I don't think it's going to solve any problems. But even more than that, I had a much easier time last year making a difference and reaching out to voters because Virginia doesn't have campaign donation limits. The campaign donation limits came about after Eugene McCarthy shocked the world and the Democratic establishment and forced LBJ out of the race. It's the campaign finance restrictions are actually put forward by the establishment to keep people like Gene McCarthy from ever happening again.
Okay, thank you. And now we have Tim Wise is going to ask a question. Oh, okay. For the House, okay. Hey, we don't have another question because Suzanne left. Is there anybody on the floor that would like to ask a question? Well, that's a good question, too. I didn't get to that part. Both Senator Warner and Mr. Gillespie both declined to participate tonight, and that is why they are not in attendance. Yes.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
David Hughes from Bluemont Civic Association. If you were to be elected, with which party would you end up caucusing?
I think you can't really answer that. I mean, it's kind of unclear what the Senate's even going to look like after the election. So I don't think it makes any sense to kind of commit to anything in that regard. Another question?
Okay. I think that's all the time we have for two questions. Yes, you do. So we'll take it from there.
Well, I'm asking you to do something that's uncomfortable. I know most of you haven't voted outside the two-party system. You might not have had to. I know some of you have, though. And it's a liberating thing, I can tell you. Leaving the two-party system freed me up to say whatever I wanted to say. And a lot of people, so many people want this. So many people tell me, keep running, Rob. You're doing the right thing. You know I'm not raising $20 million from big money and interest. You know that. You know that I'm telling you the truth because when you ask a question, I answer it. I'm going to events at Tea Party events and LGBT events, and I'm saying the same thing because we all want freedom, and we all want a government that's not telling us how to live our lives and run our businesses. There's an appropriate role for government, but when government gets too big and too injurious of our rights, we have to say stop. I'm the only person who's studied both law and economics. I'm probably the only person in the race who has both been laid off and started a business. I'm the only person who was born in Virginia, but I'm the first person to say that that shouldn't matter. I don't care if you were born outside this country, where you're born, where you're from, who your parents are. Everybody deserves equal opportunity. That's what I stand for. That's what libertarians stand for. If you'd like to learn more about me or my campaign, what I think about healthcare, what I think about tax reform, entitlement reform, please come talk to me afterwards. Come to a campaign event and support me. Thank you very much, and I'd like to just give a shout out to my friend Jeff Carson, who's also running. He's a great man. He's sincere, and we believe in the same things. So please listen to what he has to say very closely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. And with that, we move on to the U.S. House of Representative race. And if those folks could come up, that would be great.
We have assigned seats.
I don't know what they want us to do.
Mike, is there a plan here?
I think wherever you sit down is the order you're going to go.
Okay. Good?
Nice to see you.
How are you, Micah?
Well, how are you?
Hi, I'm Gwendolyn Beck.
Gwendolyn, Gerry, nice to meet you.
Gerry, yes, we have one
Gerry,
down
Don
one
Beyer.
more.
Don Beyer. Gerry Blais, nice to meet you, sir. Scott. Okay, Don Beyer. Very nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Scott, Gerry Blais, you please. Nice to meet you. Oh, okay. Yeah, please. Do you actually? I'm fine going first if you want to go second.
Okay,
Whatever
we've
you
got
want.
5 folks for this race.
Okay.
We have Mr. Beyer, Mr. Edmond, Ms. Beck, correct? And then Mr. Blais, and then Mr. Carson.
Gerry Blais.
Oh, shoot. Okay, you want Don Beyer,
Gerry Blais.
Micah, excuse
Names, please, so we
Ex-
can all hear.
excuse me?
Complete names so we can hear who everybody is, please.
Sure, that's, okay. We have Don Beyer, Micah Edmond, Gwendolyn Beck, Gerry Blais, and Jeffrey Carson. And this is the order in which you folks are going to go here tonight, and we'll start with opening statements, and then we'll move to questions. Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Proven, principled, progressive. So my name is Don Beyer, and growing up, I was taught that we were each put on this earth to build something larger than ourselves, to serve others, and that's why I'm honored today to be the Democratic nominee for U.S. Congress. We face significant challenges today. 16 million American children live in poverty. Our middle class is shrinking. 10 million Americans are out of work. It's a 16.9% unemployment rate for our young people 19 to 29. The gap between the rich and poor is growing, and this is why I want to go to Congress, to fight for these families. We need to build a new American economy based on the deepest possible investments in human capital. Universal pre-K, the Common Core standards, few high school dropouts, and affordable college educations. A good education must be a right that every child in this nation enjoys. Fighting for families also means stopping any and all attempts to repeal President Obama's health care reform. 8 million Americans today have signed up for the health care coverage, and 5 million more, not in Virginia, 5 million more benefit from expanded Medicaid. We need to make sure our schools and our communities are safe with common sense gun laws to keep guns out of the hands of criminals and the dangerously mentally ill. It's time to stand up to the NRA and say enough. We need comprehensive immigration reform, and we need to celebrate marriage equality for all. And we have to address the crisis of climate change. The Antarctic ice is melting, plants and animals are racing to extinction, and sea levels are rising. This is why I will fight for a national carbon tax, the single most effective solution to control greenhouse gases. As a businessman, lieutenant governor, and ambassador under President Obama,
Thank you.
Hi there. I'm Gwendolyn Beck. So nice to be here tonight. I grew up going to events like this. I was very involved in the local community when I was younger, and I appreciate all the time that you guys spend coming out here listening to us tonight. I think I'm shorter than him, so I've got to adjust the microphone. How tall are you, Don? Anyway, thank you so much. Arlington is a fabulous place to live. I live here, and I just love it. I live above the Iwo Jima Memorial, and I'm very proud to say that I have a car that's a 2008, and I only have 38,000 miles on it. But I just want to tell you a little bit about my background, about my political views, and about why I'm running for Congress. So I'll start early. My father lived up here. My mother lived in Florida. Unfortunately, I wasn't lucky enough to be able to go to school in Northern Virginia, but I was lucky enough to land a job after college as regional sales manager for Thomas Cook Travel here in the Mid-Atlantic. I went on to become manager of national sales for Eastern Airlines, and when it ceased operations, I went into finance in U.S. government securities, and I worked on the bond trading floor, so I'm very familiar with the U.S. debt. And then I moved into stocks and wrote a book on personal finance for education designed to teach the consumer. So most of my life was apolitical, but then I started paying attention, and I wanted to get involved, and I realized that I'm fiscally responsible and socially inclusive. I'm right in the middle. I'm all about America first. Fiscally responsible, we have plenty of money. We just need to allocate it better. Socially inclusive, I believe in rights for everyone and have respect for everyone, but I also believe it's a very unstable world. In fact, today we had another terrible tragedy. And I think that we have to have a strong national defense. I think everyone is disappointed in the gridlock in Congress, and I decided to run because I believe that we need to build badly needed coalitions in Congress. The Republicans and the Democrats aren't talking to each other, and there is no independent in the House of Representatives, and it's the only way that we're going to be able to truly fix the gridlock.
All right. How are you all? So to address that earlier comment about the Republicans and the Democrats looking too familiar, I don't think that's the case, Don. It's true. I like the tie, though. So, Micah Edmond. My name's Micah, and I'm working hard to earn your vote to represent you in Congress. As a former Marine officer who's far from my country overseas, I'm tired of the fact that many Americans here at home are left out of sight, out of mind, and quite frankly, left behind. I see my campaign as a mission to make the American dream achievable again for all people. If elected, my top priority will be to work with Republicans and Democrats alike to enact a balanced 10-year economic plan that ends sequestration, allows us to pay down our debt responsibly, balance our budget, reform our tax code, strengthen our entitlement system, and allow us to do this, which is the most important thing. Direct investment into the things that make the American dream possible. That's education, that's infrastructure, and that's our national security. You can count on me to bring a new vision, a new voice, and a new energy to making the American dream achievable again. As your representative, my vision will represent policies that are optimistic, forward-looking, and inclusive. My vision will represent our common future that also includes our growing population of younger voters, minorities, and immigrants. My energy in office will reflect what you've seen of me on my campaign trail. I'll continue to see you twice a week at transit stops. I'll go door to door every day, and I'll see you at forums like this because I'm interested in what you all have to hear, what you all have to say. Now, I know that everyone here has heard the whole stuff about Republican, Democrat crossing the line. Here's the thing that you have to think most about in this election. You have to vote for someone that you think represents the American dream, someone that's actually trying to make it achievable for all, and someone that you think will show up every single day and take on what you have to say and fight for it. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me? Hi. My name is Gerry Blais, and I'm your independent Green Party candidate for Congress. I was inspired to run when, working as an intelligence analyst for the U.S. government, I noticed our flawed strategies continuing to fail abroad. That's why I would support an immediate pullout from all wars of aggression and choice abroad. I would also support drug legalization. And in keeping with the Green Party spirit, I would also support a massive increase in public transportation, universal health care, and an elimination of the of federal income tax on the first $100,000 of income. Thank you.
Hello? Hello. Hi, guys. Good evening. Look, I'm going to just start out by saying Don's right. We do face a lot of challenges today. As a nation, as a people, we face a number of serious problems. But we can't even begin to address these problems if we continue to pretend they don't exist. If we continue to allow our politicians to get away with kicking the can down the road for another year, another election cycle, another generation. Is it scary to face these problems head on? You bet. $17.5 trillion in debt. Deficits averaging close to $1 trillion a year over the past decade. Insolvent and underfunded entitlement programs to the tune of many more tens of trillions of dollars. The fact that we will alone this year spend close to $250 billion just on net interest payments on the debt. And that's just the fiscal side of the house. Of course it's scary, folks. Of course it's easier to pretend that all of this is somebody else's problem, that this mess is somebody else's responsibility to clean up. Of course it's easier to vote for politicians that tell you that debt and deficits don't matter, that printing money out of thin air is a good idea, and that stealing from our kids by running up their tab on our behalf is acceptable, simply because they're not here to put up a hand to say stop. Our spending problem is a scary one, as is our meddlesome, haphazard, and dangerous interventionist foreign policy, our failed and unconstitutional drug war, NSA domestic spying, militarized police forces, the erosion of our civil liberties, the ever-strengthening pull of the special interest groups that have such a stranglehold on our political process. I could go on. The bottom line is this, folks. You want problem solving? You want results? You want someone representing you in Congress that's willing to fight the good fight day in and day out for each and every one of you? Then you've got yourself a candidate. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. And now we're going to move on to our question and answer period. And Don Gurney is up again, I believe. Randy Swart, Stephanie Pryor, and Tim Wise. And I think what we're going to do, somebody took my sheet that had the names of the candidates, but that's okay. How about if we move this direction and answering the questions, if that's all right by everybody? We'll just tick down this way this time. Okay, Stephanie, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Pryor with the Penrose Neighborhood Association on East Columbia Pike. In the past 12 years, we've only passed about 3 appropriations bills on time. What would you personally do to break the partisanship and actually get something passed on time, like what the rest of us have to do with our jobs?
Hello? Stephanie, that's a great question. And it makes me think about how unaccountable, in general today, we allow our politicians to be at the federal level. You want to talk about appropriations bills? How about we talk about running a balanced budget? I mean, good God, folks, whether you're at any level of government, isn't that the first thing that we would require of our elected representatives, to run a balanced budget? How difficult is that, right? And actually, the question is, how much more difficult does it make it for incumbents, right, when they're forced to do that? Think about how much more difficult it would be to stay in office if you don't have the ability to pay off special interest groups with borrowed funds from future generations. My priorities, if I was to be elected, are in 4 key areas: balancing the budget, stimulating the economy and jobs, pursuing sensible drug policy, and pursuing a non-interventionist foreign policy. In all areas, I would do everything I can to hold the government and to hold my fellow elected representatives accountable for their actions. Thanks, Stephanie.
I think it's dangerous to use 3 bills as some sort of metric for doing a good job or a bad job or greater than 3. It really depends on what kind of bills were brought up. If those are bills that will support the drug war, support wars abroad, raise taxes, make healthcare less affordable, I wouldn't support any of them. Hopefully 0 of those bills would be passed. And I wouldn't see that as some sort of bad metric. So again, it's really what sort of bills. And again, it's sort of a libertarian populist. I like universal healthcare for everyone. I like free college education. I like ending the drug war, legalizing all drugs. Those are the bills I would support. So how many bills would I support? It depends how many bills we can have brought up that fit that agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. And so why don't we work on actually answering that question? Appropriations bills, you're correct. There are about 13 appropriations committees, and every year they're asked to appropriate dollars. The problem isn't so much is that we're only appropriating 3 bills out of 12 years. It's the fact that the appropriations is driven by a budget. We have no budget. The budget committee sets the cap. So back to my first priority, which is we need a actual 10-year balanced economic plan that sets the cap for appropriations, so therefore then the appropriations committees can act. Without the direction and the given to set the appropriations limit, they cannot appropriate. So that's why you have the problem that you have. It's a symptom, not the problem. The problem is a balanced budget economic solution. Thank you.
Oh, there it goes. Okay, I can give you this one back. Is that working? Yes, it is. Okay. So passing and passing an appropriation bill on time. I mean, one of the reasons I'm sitting here is that I'm so frustrated that almost no bills are passed on time and that we have serious gridlock on all levels. But certainly an appropriation bill, which is so important to our government. I think the shutdown affected us here in the 8th District of Virginia in a huge way, and I'll never forget the time that I walked up to the park, which was gated off, and this little 4-year-old is crying there, and his father's got his hands in his head, that he doesn't even know what to do about it. But we have the same problems in Washington. They're not going to be fixed until we can stop the gridlock. So we don't get the appropriations bill passed because they can't decide on all the issues that go along with it. And the role of Congress is basically the bank to appropriate money. The role of the president is to run the government. So we need to make sure that we have budgets from all the departments and all the appropriated money that's supposed to go in certain places to Congress in a timely manner. And again, we need to build coalitions so that the Republicans and the Democrats stop fighting, especially in the House of Representatives. And I also believe that the budget doesn't always have to be balanced. I think we should look at it like our household budgets, that we do make expenditures for certain large items, and we might go over, and then some years we might have a surplus, as we did in the Clinton administration, and then some years we might be balanced. But I do not think that we should handcuff ourselves to a balanced budget.
You know, I've been in business for 40 years, and I can't imagine surviving even 1 year without figuring out the appropriations process early in the year. I was ambassador to Switzerland for 4 years, and for 4 years we worked on a continuing resolution, which meant we didn't have a budget for 11 of the 12 months. And long about September 10th, they would approve a budget, and then we would be responsible for spending all the rest of the money in 3 weeks, which is the case of good money chasing bad projects, and we'd have to resist. I met with Chris Van Hollen, who is the ranking Democrat on the Budget Committee a few weeks ago, to talk about this specific problem. And it really came down to the larger issue, as Gwendolyn mentioned, of a broken Congress. This is a very important reason why I want to run. I was lieutenant governor for 4 years with the Democrat, Doug Wilder, 4 years with the Republican, George Allen. And in the 400-some pieces of legislation I was responsible for creating in Virginia, I think every single one had Democratic and Republican co-sponsors. I want to go there as a strong Northern Virginia Democrat to work across party lines, to build relationships of friendship and trust and mutual respect that can actually bring things together. Someday, when Democrats are again in majority, I promise you we will push for a budget early on, a good appropriations process. And in the meantime, while we have a mixed government, we'll do our best to work across party lines.
Thank you.
Okay, John, you're up next. Mr. Beyer, I think we're going to move questions this way this time, so you'll go first. So Go ahead, Don.
Don Gurney, Dominion Hills. A trade policy is kind of key to the economy and to the job creation here in the United States. There'd be two major trade bills coming up before the next Congress, the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Free Trade Area. What's your position on these two trade treaties and why?
Thank you, Don. I am a strong pro-trade Democrat, and not just because I sell Volvos and Land Rovers, et cetera. I have been a free trade Democrat since I was in college because economies only grow from outside. And when you try to seal yourself off, all you do is contract. Now, I also recognize that there have been significant problems with the trade agreements in the past. Trade agreements that have done nothing more than ship jobs to Southeast Asia, rather than growing jobs here at home. So it's incredibly important that the trade agreements we make with the TPP and with the transatlantic are ones that actually grow the American economy. But as the President and Michael Froman, the U.S. Trade Representative, have said, we cannot cut ourselves off from the two most growing economies in the world. So I'm looking forward to working closely with the U.S. Trade Rep, with the President and others to get good trade agreements. By the way, there's much made of the whole idea of how Congress can be involved early in this. And I think the President and this administration have recognized that there are many complicated issues that have to be discussed with Congress and discussed with the major players in America, the labor unions, corporations, et cetera, before these agreements are finally negotiated. So we don't come back to an up or down vote in Congress that we, the people, have no real say over. But I think we're only going to grow the jobs that we need by continuing to invest and be main players in a world economy.
Is that for his comments or for me coming? No, I'm teasing. I agree with quite a bit of what you said, Don, and I do think that trade is extremely important. I think we're very lucky that we have Secretary Penny Pritzker, who is out traveling the world and helping us with our trade agreements. We also need to trade both ways, as Don said, and I think if we're sending goods and services overseas, we need to bring things here, as you're doing with your car dealership. There's about 7.3 billion people in the world, and there's only 350 million people in the United States of America. One of the things that I do now is I'm an equity analyst for companies like Procter & Gamble, Avon, Clorox, Tupperware. They have 90% of their sales overseas. So these trade agreements are extremely important to us and to them. And I think a bigger issue that we have is the corporate tax rate. This past Congress did promise us that they would lower the corporate tax rate, especially the amount that is charged to corporations to repatriate profits from overseas. This is something that they didn't do, and we're seeing our corporations start to leave. This is a serious issue to the United States because we do need to maintain our tax base, and we don't want our corporations to leave. And this is something that I will fight for, is to continue with the trade agreements that make sense and to lower the corporate tax rate and the repatriation rate.
Thank you very much. Specifically to the question, how do I feel about the trade agreements? I think they're pretty good. I think they could be better. I think the larger problem here has been alluded to by some of these, but not attacked in specifically in what you would do as a congressman. So you've got the trade rep that's going to negotiate these for the president. You've got the secretary that's going to be involved in part of it. But you've also got Congress, particularly the Ways and Means Committee. That's a very powerful voice on dealing with these trade agreements to make sure that it's not only free, but that it's also fair to Americans. And one of the things that people haven't talked about here, which quite frankly matters a lot, is that when we look at exporting U.S. jobs, as opposed to making sure that these things are free, people care about that. Labor matters. Also, human rights matter. I know a lot of people say that we should be making trade deals on the basis of just purely U.S. interests, but some of those things matter. Thank you.
Hi, does this one work? Great. How do I feel about trade agreements? I feel trade agreements are rarely actually that. They're usually ways to partition privilege from one country to another. A real trade agreement would be 1 page long. There wouldn't be, that much involved with it. And also, if you really support free trade, you also have to support the movement of human capital, of people to move across borders freely. Right now, as an IT worker, I receive a very bloated salary because other people in my profession are not allowed into the border. And as much as I enjoy that bloated salary, it's an economic distortion that should not be allowed. We should allow more people in to take jobs, which will ultimately be good for us, as in more people will pay more taxes. So again, with free trade, I think the unspoken issue is human capital and the free movement thereof, and we need to allow more people across our borders. Thank you. Did you want to work?
Hello, hello. All right, here we go. Great question. As the libertarian in the race, and actually I'd just like to point out, many of you might have already noticed this, but you've got 3 libertarians up here, more or less, right? Against a Republican and Democrat. Guys, we got to do better at coordinating next time before the campaign season starts. Socially liberal, fiscally conservative. It's very libertarian, Gwendolyn. So to your specific question, sir, as a libertarian, I'm for complete free trade. Not a big fan of either of these agreements or fast tracking in particular. So I think President Obama has usurped some power from Congress with this fast tracking stuff, and obviously, as an elected representative, I would not be a fan, and I would try to hold the president accountable there. That's the answer to your question, so I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay, for this set of questions, how about if we go Micah and then we go that direction and come back to you, Mr. Beyer, and then finish with you, Ms. Beck, and then we'll move forward to figuring out the next way. So, just to make it even and fair. So, Randy Swart, you're up.
Randy Swart from Barcroft. My question is, given the dysfunctionality of Congress, what do you hope to achieve in your first term, and what committee assignments will you seek in order to do that?
Thank you. Great question, sir. Dysfunctionality. I think that what we need, and that what I hope to do, if elected, is to take a seat in the majority, and with that, to make my party come closer to the middle and actually be pragmatic problem solvers. I believe ideology is important. I believe that's certainly where we start every conversation, but not at the expense of not producing anything for people that count on you back at home. 2 committees that have the largest impact, where I hope to sit, matter a lot here in Virginia. One is Ways and Means Committee. You can't absolutely talk about enacting a balanced long-term budget solution without that committee. That committee is where we do things like discuss revenue. It's where we would do things like discuss entitlement spending and all the tax reforms. Another big committee I like to sit on is the House Armed Services Committee. Virginia is one of the top 2 states for dollars that get returned out of the federal budget for defense spending. Here in particular in Virginia, as you listen to Governor McAuliffe lately, we're about $840 million shy of a federal budget here. We've contributed that to the lack of defense spending and sequestration. We need someone to work on breaking that logjam, because a lot of those research and development dollars that have been come out of defense that have been spent in Northern Virginia have seeded new business growth. That particular new business growth, everyone talks about big business, but really it's the small businesses. And it's the small business that have had the largest contributory effect in net job production, as well as all ancillary things like taxes that go to local and officials and things like that. Thank you.
In terms of committees, the committee that immediately comes to mind would be the House Intelligence Committee. I'd like to be on that committee so that I could pass on real, actual information to my constituents, rather than the ridiculous hype that you're fed now about the war on terror, the war on drugs. In terms of changes I'd like to achieve, I'd like to restore a measure of freedom. Again, fighting for free trade. Fighting for free trade. And again, sorry. And ultimately what I'd like to begin is really a revolution toward more libertarian principles, but with a strong safety net for everyone at the bottom, universal health care and free higher education. Thank you.
Actually, nice job, Gerry. Yeah. Hello, hello. Can you guys hear me? Okay. It's going in and out, I think. Sorry. Specifically answering the question, House Armed Services and Veterans Affairs. I actually am a former Army captain, Iraq vet, I don't necessarily wear that on my sleeve, but I have served my country folks overseas, and when it comes to the Middle East and that region and foreign policy in general, I am the expert, the subject matter expert up here, okay? I'd like to just quickly go back to something that Micah has said several times here tonight. He's talked about paying down the debt, and he's talked about pursuing a balanced budget. Well, Micah, I'd really like to know, when I go to your website, you do pay some lip service to that. When you get into the specifics, all I see is more spending and a few measured tax cuts. So, hello? So, to me, when you reduce revenue by tax cuts and you increase spending, that doesn't help balance the budget. It gets us nowhere near paying off our debt. So, I'd just like to know perhaps how you'd actually like to accomplish that. And I don't mean to pick on Micah, at least he's paying it lip service. Don, on the other hand, if you go through every single one of his 14 issues on the website, doesn't even pay it lip service. Doesn't even acknowledge the fact that we're $17.5 trillion in debt, that we've run deficits close to $1 trillion a year for the past decade, that we're looking at a fiscal gap going forward. And to be clear, that's the difference between outflows and inflows of tens of trillions of dollars. Not a mention, right? 14 issues, not one mention. So we can pay lip service all we want when it comes to balancing the budget and when it comes to potentially paying off our debt at some point. But I'm the only candidate in the race that actually gives clear ways forward on how we can do that. Thank you.
I think Randy's question goes to the heart of the dysfunctionality of Congress. So anything we're going to get done in my first term is going to have to be with likely Republicans. So there's three things that I'm particularly focused on. First, we must make progress on the carbon tax. The great existential crisis in our world is climate change. It affects every one of us. It affects American health. It affects people around the globe. And there's a wonderful proposal in Congress right now that passes a carbon tax and refunds 100% of it to the American citizens on a prorated basis. It's a net raise for almost everybody except the most wealthy. It's something that Republicans can like because it takes money out of the government and gives it back to people. Second, we have to do something about guns. 30,000 people died of gun violence last year, 11,000 homicides alone. And I don't know a Republican around who says we want to get guns to criminals or guns to the dangerously mentally ill. Let's not focus on the biggest, gun registration or anything crazy like that, politically unpalatable. Let's focus on keeping guns out of the hands of the mentally ill and guns out of the hands of criminals. And third, I very much think that we have to continue to improve gun. Right now, one of the things that most upsets me is there's a 30-hour threshold. If you are work under 30 hours, you don't have to be covered by the healthcare exchange. And so you see employers actually dumping employees below the 30 hours to do that. That's just not right. By the way, when it comes to balancing budget, I think we need to move in the right direction. But first, we have to put 10 million people back to work. You cannot cut your way to prosperity.
Does this mean I can avoid my committee assignments too? I know, okay. Okay, the dysfunctionality in Congress. This is going to be a really hard one to stop if you're a Republican or if you're a Democrat. So in my perfect world, we're going to have 217 Democrats and we're going to have 217 Republicans, and the fine people of the 8th District of Virginia who believe in George Washington and the founders of our country are going to send little old me to Congress, and I'm going to make the two of them talk to each other because I'm not sure how those committee assignments are going to work, but I'm going to make them both sit at the table. I don't know any other way around it. I mean, I know people on the Hill, and they say it's beyond bad. There's people that the same area, the Republican will go to Dulles to take a flight home, and the Democrat will go to Reagan National. I mean, it's bad. So we've got to fix that. As far as what committees to be on, I think appropriations here is very important. It's a hard committee to get on. But if I'm a swing vote, I'll get on it. We have to build the coalitions. And of course, Armed Services, Veterans Affairs, and the fun one, the Kennedy Center Honors Committee, because my district is so close if anybody needs tickets. Thank you. What?
Okay, so we're going to move to our final question tonight from Tim Wise, and this time we're going to start with you, Ms. Beck, and then go to Mr. Beyer, and then Carson, and then with Mr. Edmond. So Tim, go ahead.
Tim Wise from the Clarendon Courthouse Civic Association. There's almost a day that doesn't go by that taxpayers' money is not wasted. At least 4 or 5 big stories almost every day that goes by. Which of you plans to become the next Senator Tom Coburn, who seems to be the only member of Congress who seems to be concerned with the waste of taxpayer money?
Well, rest assured, I'm very concerned about the waste of taxpayer money, and I can also assure you I don't want to look like Tom Coburn. The money that's being wasted is atrocious. $5 billion from the Department of Agriculture that they basically can't find. We've got programs that have been paid for and then rescinded. The rollout of Obamacare, almost $1 billion, and then they had to turn around and do it again. We've got some military programs that aren't working the way it should. Not to pick on the military, but the F-35 doesn't seem to be doing what it should be doing, and it's the largest acquisition in the world. I feel confident that they'll be able to fix it and that we will be able to sell this plane to other lands. But for right now, it is a problem. I think, as I mentioned before, our budgets are going to go up and down. National security, especially right now, I think we have a serious vacuum of leadership. We've got ISIS on the move, and we're in a very, very unstable world. And I'm afraid that we're going to have to spend some more money on the military, because if we want to maintain our quality of life and our peacefulness, we have to make sure we're safe. And also our prosperity isn't going to come unless we're safe. So I would look at everything going out the door. And I'm a budget finance person, so I would make sure that it's a frugal budget.
Yeah, I mentioned early on that I've been in business for 40 years. And one of the things you do in a small family business is first is try to survive month to month. The other part is you want to know where every single dollar is going. And I'll do my best to do that also as a member of Congress. A couple of things jump right to mind. First of all, whenever there's a big government or there's a big bureaucracy, whether it's corporations or government, there's going to be waste. And that's not to excuse it. That's to say that it's our responsibility as leaders to ferret it out, to make it go away. Let me give you 3 good examples. We have about 186 tactical nuclear weapons left in Eastern Europe. These are left over from 1945, 46, 47. They have vacuum tubes. They are designed to be dropped by airplanes on enemy troops or on our own. The Department of Defense is planning to spend $20 billion to upgrade these tactical nuclear weapons. It makes much more sense to do as so many have recommended, including our last few NATO ambassadors, just to get them out of Europe, store them in North Dakota. We have 900 military bases around the world, most of them left over from World War II. We're down from 1,000 10 years ago. I'm not sure that those 100 missing military bases have made much difference in our force posture. As we shrink them, we're then able to provide the force that we need. We spent $100 million last year killing wild animals in the United States. Craziness. There's many, many, many more examples. And as your congressman, I'll do my best to find them.
Oh, right, that's me. Thank you for that question. Finally, right? We get somewhere. Folks, I'm the only candidate in the race. As I said, it's very clear about what I would do if elected. And when it comes to balancing the budget and stopping this waste of taxpayer dollars, there are a number of things, 2 in particular, that I'll talk to you about tonight real quick. First things first, and in very tripartisan manner, I would co-sponsor Representative Justin Amash's business cycle balanced budget amendment. This would effectively strip Congress of its power to recklessly overspend, okay? Second thing I would do is I would personally sponsor legislation that would require all federal departments and agencies to reduce their budgets by 5%. 5%, folks, over 2 years. They would have utmost flexibility, and the department's heads would have 100% discretion on how to achieve those cuts. Not asking for a whole lot. And to Don's point earlier, you got it backwards, Don. You get to prosperity by balancing budgets, by getting the government out of the way of business, right? You cut regulation, and you simplify the tax code dramatically, lowering rates across the board and getting rid of all forms of corporate welfare, which, by the way, I'd love to hear your take on that. That's how you get to prosperity. If you want proof, all you have to do, folks, is look at World War II. After World War II, we cut spending by 60+%. 60+%. And what did we see over the next generation? 5% GDP growth, real GDP growth. It can be done. We can do it. Let's make it happen. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for the question. Actually, every policy I've advocated would cut the budget. I kind of take issue with some of my opponents. I don't understand what good it does to know where your dollars are going if you're advocating for continued wars of choice and aggression that are infinitely expensive abroad. Also, ending the drug war here at home. It's much cheaper to give someone drug counseling than to lock them up in a federal penitentiary at a cost of $50,000 a year. We could demilitarize the police. That seems like an incredible waste of money. Also, we could just shrink the government. A smaller government will cost less. And finally, the idea that anyone up here, besides a libertarian and me, are really interested in shrinking government is laughable. When's the last time a Republican or a Democrat did shrink government and did cut spending? Thank you.
Thank you. Where's the gentleman? There. All right. Back to your question, fraud, waste, and abuse. I've worked with Tom Coburn. He's a great man. And Tom Coburn has a great statement, and that is, unfortunately, when we whip open the federal budget, there is no one line item that says fraud, waste, and abuse. It just isn't, right? People talk about that, but it doesn't exist. So this is what you need. You need capable, experienced individuals who sit on committees and actually do their job. A job's called oversight. Just because you served in the military doesn't mean that you're qualified to be a great person on the House Armed Services Committee. You may have served in the military, doesn't mean you're qualified to be a great president. History has borne that out in spades. What it does take is someone that's actually have credentials in having done these things. So you want to talk about fraud, waste, and abuse in the House Armed Services Committee? You got to find someone that's actually been staffer on that committee that knows where it is. I have. Talk about someone that's been working on writing the budget. I have. I worked at the Pentagon. You want to talk about balancing your budget? I have. I was on the Simpson Bowles Commission. Page after page after page after page of solutions. It's not that there aren't solutions out there to solve these problems that I've worked on and I've produced. It's the fact that we lack men and women who have the courage to step up and enact these things. That's what you're voting for, ladies and gentlemen. No joke, it's a choice. There are a bunch of people who sit around and talk about it, but they've never done it. You got a lot of people that want to lob insults to other people about something that they've done or haven't done, but they haven't. No solutions, no experience, no credibility.
Okay, folks, that concludes the question and answer period, and now we move to closing statements, same order as we did opening statements, and Mr. Beyer, you're
Energy and commerce, ways and means. Thank you all for inviting me here tonight. From birth, I've been taught to fight for the poor, for workers, for those who suffer from discrimination and hatred. I was taught to try to address the problems before us, to be a change agent, to be a leader. We must take seriously our responsibility to provide principled moral leadership in the world. We need to balance our economic dynamism and our military might with our human rights values and respect for people, no matter the country or conflict. I will fight to raise the minimum wage. I will do all I can to put Americans back to work. I will work to lift our children and our families out of poverty. I will always protect a woman's right to choose. I will be the strongest voice on climate change that I can be. I will take on the NRA to keep guns out of the hands of the mentally ill and criminals. I will celebrate all that Obamacare has already done and work to make it better. And I will work for a legal path for citizenship for those who work so hard to pay taxes and obey our laws and make our economy grow. And I will continue the work of those who fought so bravely for marriage equality in Virginia and in our land. I served as lieutenant governor for 8 years, where I worked to bring real change in the lives of families in poverty of those with disabilities, and of the victims of sexual assault. I have grown a family business right here in Northern Virginia, where we've created hundreds of jobs and invested deeply in this community. I was proud when President Obama asked me to lead the transition team at the Department of Commerce. I was very proud to represent you overseas as the ambassador in Switzerland and Liechtenstein. This is what I offer: proven experience, tested leadership, and a lifelong commitment to serving others. I ask for your vote on November 4th. Thank you. Good night.
He's a tough act to follow. I agree with a lot of what you said, so I'm not going to go back over that. But a couple of things that we didn't address, and one thing I wanted to bring up, I am also a volunteer at the Arlington Agency on Aging as a guardian and a conservator. I think it's very important that we protect our senior citizens, and I also am firmly believing that a promise is a promise. One thing this Congress did is bite into the military pensions. It was a small amount, only 1%, but I think that that should be sacred. The federal workers' pension and the military pension, I think that we have to fight for. Also Social Security and Medicare. I am right now enrolled in George Mason University for a master's in gerontology. It's an online program, so I have plenty of time to run for Congress. And I will fight, definitely fight for the rights of the senior and, of course, for children and women and everybody. I'm on the same page with Don about we really have to protect, especially women's rights, that they can make their own choice. It's very important to me. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, we need to build coalitions in Congress. Where does that start? It started right in my campaign. We have, of course, independents who are middle of the road, who are fiscally responsible, socially inclusive. They consider themselves the silent middle. We have moderate Republicans, and we have disappointed Democrats. Sorry, Don. But we have already built a coalition, and we see it every day. You'll see it in my volunteers. You'll see it in my donors. These are the people that are a little bit disappointed and feel that we have a vacuum of leadership and it needs to be fixed. I ask for your vote on November 4th. I ask you to please go to my website or talk to John or Caitlin, my campaign managers. Anything that we can help you with, any questions we can answer, please volunteer, donate, and be a part of the new United States of America. We do want to change this, and we think we can start this right here in the 8th District of Virginia because it is where our country started. Thank you very much.
Hello, hello. Is everyone awake? Joke? Smile's not that bad. It's almost over. I can tell you this. Well, I'll tell you. When I was born, I didn't have to worry about being educated to or taught to fight for the poor because I was poor. And being born poor and coming from humble backgrounds, right, it means a lot. But I'll tell you what, it doesn't mean that you can't do great for this country simply because you come from one background or another. You can. What matters most in this election is not a lot of people getting in front of you and running off lots of themes and lists about things they're going to do. Really? Truly? You're an average American. How many do you accomplish in a day? Put you in environment of Congress. 20? Does that make sense? No. One thing Ronald Reagan said that made him the most effective president in the modern era is when he came to the office, he said, I'm going to focus on 3 things, and if I'm lucky, I'll accomplish 1, and we'll actually get this country moving in the right direction on the 2nd. That's the mechanism of Congress. So it's great to listen to a bunch of platitudes about a long list of things, but what is someone really going to focus on? What is it really? What are those 3 things? And if they're not telling you what that thing is and what ties them all together, they have no message. And if they have no message, what does it mean to you, and how does it link to your life? So I've told you, for me, it's about making the American dream achievable again. At the core of that is finding a way to work with Republicans and Democrats to produce a balanced economic plan. If someone's not doing that, they're not going to find the dollars available to do things like invest in education, our infrastructure, and our national security. And that's just the long and short of it. Everything else sounds pretty, but it's just simply not real, and it is not effective. Thank you.
So how many of you like the way things have gone for the past 2 years? A A minority. So why do you think that voting for a Democrat or a Republican would bring actual change, something better? If something's failed, as long as you can remember, maybe you should try a new option. Why don't we end the drug war? Why don't we open the borders? Why don't we end wars of choice and aggression abroad? Those are options that only me and the Libertarian are offering you. It's change or the status quo. If you like what you've been getting, keep voting for the same thing. What separates myself from the Libertarian is I also advocate a broad safety net for those on the bottom, universal health care for all, and free higher education. Thank you very much.
Evening again. Well, I guess that's why they say, Gerry, we should focus on what we agree on, right? Gerry stole all my lines about definition of insanity. Thanks, Gerry. But he's right. He's right. You know, at the end of the day, it doesn't bother me if you vote for myself or Gerry or even Gwendolyn, although I'm starting to think she's a little less libertarian than I thought at the very beginning. What matters is the point that Gerry made. You know, Einstein once said that the definition of insanity is continuing to vote for Democrats and Republicans, expecting things to change for the better. He might have said that. I don't know. No, it's the definition of insanity, right? It's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right? The Republicans and Democrats, team red, team blue, right, left, any way you want to chalk it up, they've made it clear they have no intention of solving the problems we face. None. They just want to keep slinging mud at each other. And they want to keep the special interest dollars flowing and the goodies flowing. Let's not forget about that. Now look, I am the Libertarian in the race. That means that we're actually going to agree. We're not going to agree on everything, but I really do think we're going to agree on more than you think. For example, do we agree that it's wrong to steal from future generations and that our politicians need to pull their heads out of their you-know-whats and get their acts together and balance the darn budget? Do we agree that there's no such thing as a free lunch, that it's wrong to print money out of thin air in order to enrich the 1% at the expense of the 99%? Do we agree that it's about time, thanks Gerry, that we stop putting people in prison for using a substance, that we should be treating drug abuse as a public health issue instead of a criminal one, and that the law enforcement community would do much better to direct all of their efforts at actually pursuing criminals, like murderers, rapists, child molesters, etc., as opposed to nonviolent drug offenders? Look, folks, I think there's a lot more that we agree on. I'm the Libertarian candidate in the race. I would really appreciate your support. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great evening.
And folks, that concludes the House of Representative race. I can say you folks are a lively bunch, and I thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
That's,